We are. All right, Nicole.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andrea, for that introduction. And thank you to everyone who's attending today, whether in person or over Zoom, or who might see this recording.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I did.
And of course, food plays an important role in regulating our blood sugar. And of course, in terms of managing other health conditions, whether it's heart disease, high blood pressure, cholesterol, kidney disease, really food is the cornerstone of chronic disease prevention and management. So we can talk a little bit more about that today. And so we'll start with the recipe demonstration. And then today's presentation is pretty informal. I don't have like a specific PowerPoint or resources to go through. So we can definitely have a nice open discussion, lots of time for questions and answers. If you want to ask me anything related to nutrition, diabetes, heart health, meal planning, I'm happy to go through all of those various topics. Okay, so I'm not sure with my setup if you can see my face and the counter, but more important that you see the counter to see what we're doing. So to start, we're going to be using, I have this little container, but any mason jar or regular container that you use for food prep is going to work for this recipe. And the nice thing about mason jars or airtight containers is that this recipe is really good for meal prep, and it will stay fresh in the container for a few days. Like if you wanted to make this on a Sunday, it probably would last for your full work week until Friday. So if you wanted to meal prep this recipe using the portions listed on the recipe card, that makes one serving. You can just double it or quadruple it so you have multiple servings throughout the week. It's also very customizable. So if you're someone who is bored eating the same thing every day, you could use a similar oat base and then change up your toppings so that each day is a little bit different. Okay, so we're going to start with our liquids. I've measured out 2/3 a cup of low-fat milk and just going to pour it into the mason jar. Now, you can use any type of milk that you want. If you don't like cow's milk or you have an allergy to dairy, you can use almond milk, soy milk, cashew milk, coconut milk. The one thing to note is that our dairy-free alternatives don't offer the same protein as cow's milk, other than soy milk. So soy milk is the one dairy-free alternative that has similar nutrition to cow's milk. All of the nut-based milks are not a source of protein. So if you're using those types of milks, you may need to add extra protein into this recipe to account for that. You also want to make sure that if you're using a non-dairy milk, it has the calcium and vitamin D added to it. That will be clearly listed on the nutrition facts table. And you want to make sure it's unsweetened, because if you're buying a milk product that says original, generally it's going to have added sugar. And if we're thinking of diabetes prevention, of course, it's important to be limiting our added sugars. So next I have 1/3 of a cup of Greek yogurt. This is the one that I used, Oikos 2% plain. So a low-fat yogurt is going to have less saturated fat compared to a higher fat yogurt. And if we're thinking of overall heart health and cholesterol, saturated fat is something that we want to be limiting. However, choosing a 2% versus a 0% fat, the little bit of fat helps to keep us full for longer. So this is going to be a more satiating breakfast. And the fat also helps to keep our blood sugar more stable. So a 1 or 2% may be a better choice than a 0%. The other thing to note with dairy is that vitamin D needs fat in order to be absorbed. So if you have a little bit of fat in your milk or yogurt, it helps us to absorb the vitamin D in those products, which makes it a little bit more nutritious. So I'm just going to add the yogurt right in here. Now, if you prefer like a thicker overnight oats or a creamier one, you may want to adjust the milk and yogurt portions a little bit. The more you make this, the more you can experiment with those portions and find a consistency that works for you. Okay, now we're going to add the vanilla extract, about a teaspoon. And vanilla is a really great way to add flavor into this recipe without any added sugar. So rather than adding honey or maple syrup, as much as those types of sweeteners are often marketed as a healthier choice, the reality is they impact our blood sugar in the same way that white sugar would. So vanilla extract adds that sweeter flavor without adding any extra sugar to this recipe. Okay, then we're gonna add our oats. I have a very, very large bag from Costco. These are sprouted rolled oats, but you can also use large flake oats. You can use steel cut oats. We just want to ideally not use the instant oats that you just add a bit of hot water to, as those, because they're instant and made to cook really quickly, those oats have a higher glycemic index. So they get digested quicker and cause a greater spike in blood sugar, compared to a rolled or large flake or steel cut oat, which gets digested slower. So we get a more gradual rise and fall in our blood sugar. So that's better for blood sugar management and also for keeping us more full. So I'm going to measure out 1/3 of a cup of the oats. Now, the benefit of the oats, I'm not sure if you can see the nutrition facts table here, but we see that for 1/3 of a cup, we have 4 grams of fiber and 6 grams of protein. I'll just move my screen up. So fiber and protein are 2 key nutrients that we really want to be including in all of our meals, but especially breakfast, because these are 2 nutrients that keep us full for longer and really keep our blood sugar more stable. So when it comes to choosing carbohydrates, the more fiber a carb has, the less impact on blood sugar, because fiber has no impact on blood sugar. So for example, this product has 23 grams of carb, 4 grams of fiber. You can actually subtract the fiber from the total carb, and that gives you net carbohydrate. So 23 minus 4, now we're looking at 19 grams of carb per serving. And so if something has less net carb, it's going to have less impact on your blood sugar. So using these oats as a carb source in the morning is going to be much better than a higher glycemic index carb like white bread or sugary cereal or a white bagel, which is going to get digested quicker, not keep us as full for as long. Okay, so now we're going to add the cinnamon into our oats. I think on the handout that you have, it recommends to shave a cinnamon stick on top of the oats. That can certainly work, or you can use your dry cinnamon. I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of that. Sorry, we'll go back. And you can certainly adjust that to your taste preferences. Now, similar to the vanilla, the cinnamon is a great way to add flavor into this recipe without adding any extra sugar. We'll talk a little bit more about cinnamon in a moment. Okay, so now we're going to mix this all together. It's going to look a bit liquidy right now, but the point of overnight oats is that overnight or after a few hours in the fridge, the oats absorb all of the liquid. And then in the morning, it's more of like a creamy oatmeal texture. Okay. Now, lastly, for our toppings, I have some fresh berries because I had them on hand, but frozen berries certainly work really well for this recipe, especially if you're someone who finds your produce goes bad really quickly. Frozen fruits and frozen vegetables are just as nutritious as fresh, and often they can be more budget friendly. So certainly using frozen fruits in recipes, especially in the winter when our selection of fruit isn't as great. So I'm just going to add in about a 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of berries into this recipe. You certainly can add this just in the morning if you'd like. And then lastly, we can add the recipe calls for slivered almonds. I'm just going to use whole almonds because that is what I had. And I'm going to measure out about 2 teaspoons of that, maybe 3 teaspoons. The benefits of the almonds is that they add some protein and some healthy fats into this recipe. So when we're thinking about breakfast and all meals in general, as I said, we want to make sure that there is a protein source, especially when there is a carbohydrate as part of the meal. If we were to make this recipe without the yogurt and the almonds that are providing protein, you would notice that this breakfast doesn't satisfy you for very long. You're probably going to feel hungry shortly after. And those carbs are going to get digested quicker and cause a greater spike in blood sugar. So the almonds act as a protein source, as does the yogurt. If you have a nut allergy, you can certainly use seeds instead, pumpkin or sunflower or hemp seeds. You could also use things like ground flax or chia, which can offer more protein, fiber, and healthy fats into this recipe. So this is the finished product. I don't want to tip it because it's a bit liquidy. And then I'm just going to put it in the fridge for the rest of the day. And tomorrow I have a breakfast ready to go for work. Now, overnight oats can be eaten cold in the morning, like you don't have to do anything to them. Or if you prefer, you can microwave it and eat it hot. So it's completely up to you. So that is our recipe demo. And now I'll just talk a little bit more about the benefits of eating breakfast. Now, as a dietitian, I would say so many of my patients say that they're not breakfast people, either because they're not hungry in the morning, or they don't have time, or they don't like traditional breakfast foods. So I will say, if you have absolutely no desire to eat in the morning, you don't necessarily have to eat breakfast. But some things to reflect on would be, if I don't eat breakfast, am I starving by the time lunch comes around? And when that happens, do I tend to overeat my lunch? Do I feel like then I want something that's a bit more indulgent? Do I feel like I don't have that much energy in the morning? Do I feel like it's hard to concentrate? Am I feeling weak? So if those points are resonating with you, it may actually be helpful to try eating something in the morning. If something like this overnight oats feels like it's going to be too heavy or too big, you can always reduce the portions in half, or you can start with something small like a fruit with a handful of nuts, or a fruit with a hard-boiled egg, or a bit of Greek yogurt and granola, just something to give you a bit of energy in the morning and ensure you're not starving by lunchtime. If you're someone who doesn't eat breakfast because you're short on time and rushed, then something like this, a good meal prep option, can help address that. Or having other options that are easy to take on the go, like a smoothie or maybe like a breakfast wrap that you've made ahead of time. In terms of diabetes prevention or management, there's a few ways that breakfast can be beneficial for that. So one, overnight, while we're not eating and we're going a long period without eating, our liver is putting sugar into our bloodstream. And our liver is going to continue to put sugar into our bloodstream until our body is getting a different source of sugar coming from carbohydrates. So one benefit of eating breakfast in the morning is to give the liver a break so it can focus on some other things and not worry about putting sugar into our bloodstream. That's why if you are living with diabetes and you test your blood sugar in the morning, sometimes it can be really high, even though we haven't eaten, because our liver is putting more sugar out. So breakfast can help with that. Also, how our blood sugar goes for the rest of the day can be very dependent on what our blood sugar is when we wake up. So if we're able to eat a blood sugar balancing breakfast, and that sort of keeps our post-breakfast sugars within target, then it can help keep the rest of our sugars in target for the rest of the day. Versus if we're waking up with a high blood sugar, or after breakfast our sugar spikes high, it can be much harder to bring our sugars down throughout the day. So that's another benefit. Another benefit is that it's an opportunity to get more key nutrients. So if we're only eating 2 meals a day, for example, it can be much harder to meet our recommended intake of various key nutrients. So in this recipe, for example, besides the protein and carbs and fiber that I've mentioned, we get the antioxidants from the berries. We get vitamin C, we get potassium from the berries. We get some key nutrients in the almonds like potassium, magnesium, and iron. We get the calcium and vitamin D from the dairy. And so those are tons of nutrients that we're getting in one meal, where if we were to skip that meal, we're maybe missing out on those things. And all of those nutrients contribute to preventing heart disease, supporting our muscles, supporting our organs, and things like that. The other benefit of eating breakfast is that it can better support our energy level for the day. And so you may find that if energy is low or we're feeling sluggish, then we may not be motivated to be active that day. We may not have the energy to grocery shop or to cook. So we may be more likely to get takeout or have a more convenient meal. Also, when our energy is low, our body knows that sugar and quick digesting carbohydrates is what's going to bring our energy up the quickest. And so when we have low energy, we tend to crave those foods more often. I mean, I know for myself, when I'm really tired, I don't feel like chewing on a salad. It feels like too much effort. I'm much more likely to, choose a bagel or something like that. So that's another reason why breakfast is important in terms of supporting our energy levels. Also, it can help with appetite later in the day. So if you're someone who feels like they struggle with that nighttime snacking, which so many of my patients do, A lot of the time that's related to not eating enough in the day, and your body is trying to make up for those missed calories. So rather eating something in the morning, it can really help your appetite for the evening and reduce some of those evening cravings as well. And that also can help with weight management. And we know being at a higher body weight can also increase our risk of developing diabetes. So I would say those are all the benefits to eating breakfast, but there's certainly no like perfect breakfast. You want to make it make sense for you in terms of your appetite, your preferences, how much time you have, what is culturally appropriate. So we just want to think about the main guidelines. Can I choose a source of protein? Can my carb include a source of fiber? And can I maybe include a fruit and vegetable with that? And then you can mix and match different types of foods to form different balanced meals, as long as you're roughly following those guidelines. Also, the timing in which you eat breakfast can, again, depend on you. We generally suggest trying to eat something within the first hour of waking up. But if you are legitimately not hungry and have no desire for food until, say, 10 or 11, then that works. You can eat something at that time. We don't all have to wake up and eat breakfast right away. Okay, so I think that's kind of all I have to say about breakfast. So now let's talk a little bit more about cinnamon. So just in terms of spices and herbs in general, herbs and spices are going to be your best way to add a ton of flavor into cooking and your food without any extra calories, sugar, and sodium. And we know as it is, most of our diets, especially if we're following kind of a typical Western diet, tend to include too much sodium and sugar compared to the recommendations. And so we always want to assess our diet and see where we can make cuts. So if, you know, we eat out a lot, if we need to rely more on packaged foods, generally our sugar and salt intake is going to be a little bit higher. So if we have the power to not add salt in cooking or not add sugar into our oats or into a hot beverage, that may feel like a small insignificant change, but those changes really add up over time. And most importantly, it's something that we have control over. And so, as I said, cinnamon is a great way to add flavor into this recipe along with the vanilla without any added sugar. I think too, herbs and spices, because they offer such a depth of flavor, it can make a very simple recipe feel a lot more elevated and complex. And so that in itself can help us feel creative in the kitchen and get more excited about cooking. I think what I hear from patients is that they get into a rut where they tend to make the same thing all the time, or they're used to always eating the same flavors. And then you're kind of like turned off by the cooking process because it's always the same. It's not exciting. And so if we maybe expand our spice inventory and herb inventory, now we have all of these different flavors to experiment with. And it can really change the flavor and add a lot of depth to kind of our typical, maybe more boring meals. I can send to Andrea, have a really good guide that lists various herbs and spices and how to use them, what to combine them with, if you're someone who's new to incorporating those into your cooking. Okay, so in terms of cinnamon specifically, so there is research out there to show how it can contribute to lowering blood sugar or preventing the progression from prediabetes to diabetes in terms of improving insulin sensitivity, or just lowering blood sugar in the moment. The thing to note about these studies is that they're often using really high doses of cinnamon in a supplemental form, where, adding a teaspoon into our overnight oats is certainly not the same quantity as what they're using in those studies. So it's not to say that there aren't great benefits to incorporating cinnamon into our cooking. It's just whenever we're interpreting these studies, we want to make sure that it's applicable to our day-to-day lives, for example. In terms of taking supplemental cinnamon, some things to consider is that all natural health products or supplements, even though they are natural, they're not always without harm. So sometimes these natural health products can interact with medications and make our medications less effective. Or we may have the mentality that, we've read cinnamon helps to lower our blood sugar, and so maybe we feel like we can stop our diabetes medication. And the reality is no supplement can replace a medication. It does just what it's called, to supplement a management strategy. So we would never want to replace medication with a vitamin or another natural health product. So that's just some things to consider in terms of the studies out there. But there is, as I say, emerging evidence that it can be helpful for diabetes prevention. It can help lower cholesterol. We know that cinnamon is rich in antioxidants, which is really important for protecting the heart. Antioxidants are good for the brain. Cinnamon is widely used in the Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet is a dietary pattern that has a lot of evidence to support its role in preventing heart complications, preventing dementia, anti-inflammatory, things like that. Now, if cinnamon is not your preferred flavor, you could also, like in this recipe or a similar recipe, use things like ginger or nutmeg or allspice. Even pumpkin spice can be nice. And using those spices would also have a similar benefit in terms of adding a lot of flavor without extra sugar or salt or calories. And a lot of spices have those anti-inflammatory, antioxidant type properties. So yeah, I think that's everything on cinnamon and on breakfast. Maybe I'll open it up to the questions and we can have a discussion for the last 25 minutes or so.
Wonderful. We did have a couple of questions come through as you were chit-chatting, so I'm just going to pull them up here.
Perfect.
Great. So our first question is from Ray. Ray's asking, rather than Greek yogurt, can I use skyr yogurt or something with a higher protein?
Yeah, absolutely. Skyr yogurt would be quite similar in terms of the consistency and nutrient profile of Greek yogurt. You also could use regular yogurt. I know a lot of people don't like the sour taste of Greek or skyr yogurt, so you absolutely could use regular. It's just regular yogurt won't be as high in protein. And regardless of our yogurt choice, we really want to try and keep it to the plain variety so we're not adding more sugar. And then you can always adjust the flavor with like your fruit or the vanilla or the spices.
Wonderful. I hope that answered your question, Ray. Feel free to follow up in the chat if you have anything additional to add to that, Ray. Our next question is from Fabiola, and they ask, can we eat the oats as a snack as well, or can we eat it at night? I'm guessing maybe as a dinner or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're having it as a snack, then you maybe want to adjust the portions, make it a little bit of a smaller portion size. You know, that's going to depend on your appetite. Certainly, you could eat it for any meal of the day. If it's like a dinner meal, you maybe want to increase the protein a little bit further. So to do that, you could either add extra yogurt or add in a tablespoon or two of hemp seeds, or you can even add in a scoop of protein powder. That would mix in pretty well and make it a much higher protein meal, which may be a bit more appropriate for dinner, for example.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is, can we put berries in the oats as a substitute for sugar?
Yeah, for sure. So fruit is always going to be a good replacement for added sugar. As much as fruit contains naturally occurring sugar, fruit also comes with fiber and a lot of key nutrients. So if the sweetness of fruit satisfies kind of like a sweet flavor that you're looking for, then that's always going to be a better choice than an added sugar.
Wonderful. And then we have a follow-up from Ray. And Ray asks, is using vanilla flavored yogurt similar to plain yogurt without having to add vanilla extract to the recipe?
The vanilla is going to have more added sugar. We can do a comparison because this is plain and I have vanilla in my fridge. So this is the vanilla skyr. And for 3/4 cup, it has 11 grams of sugar, whereas the plain has 5 grams of sugar. Now, the plain yogurt has still 5 grams of sugar because of the lactose. So all milk and yogurt is automatically going to have a few grams of sugar from the lactose. And choosing lactose-free dairy does not reduce the sugar because generally they're adding the lactase enzyme versus taking the lactose out. So the vanilla, yeah, has 6 extra grams of sugar for the same portion size.
Wow, that is a big difference for, just adding vanilla there. We have a few more questions here. Is coconut or palm sugar better than brown sugar?
Good question. No, so in terms of sugars, whether it's like white, brown, coconut, palm, organic, raw, cane sugar, all of those types of sugars basically have the same impact on our blood sugar. So even though like coconut or palm, for example, are often marketed as a healthier sugar, whether they say it has a lower glycemic index or they have more like vitamins and minerals added to it, or they're less processed. At the end of the day, all sugars impact our blood sugar in the same way. And any sort of like trace minerals that are in different types of sugars or sweeteners is not going to provide any health benefit because you would have to eat so much sugar in order to get any meaningful amount of those minerals. And of course, we can rather get those key minerals from more like whole foods. So the only benefit to choosing one of those alternative sugars is that if you find a smaller amount goes a longer way. So if you find like half a teaspoon of coconut sugar is satisfying, but you would need a full teaspoon of white sugar, then the coconut sugar is better because you're using less.
Wonderful, thank you. We have an in-house question asking, when using oatmeal to make pancakes, will it spike your blood sugar levels? So when using or adding oats into the pancakes?
Um, Well, as we've talked about, oats are a high fiber carb. So if you're using oats as the base versus like a white flour, for example, then now your pancakes are going to be higher in fiber. So in that sense, it will have less impact on your blood sugar. It may depend what else is going into the recipe and what you're combining it with. Because remember, we always want to combine a carb with a protein. So if you were having some oat-based pancakes, you would still maybe on the side want to have an egg or have some yogurt or top it with some nuts and seeds. And then, of course, limit like how much maple syrup that you're adding. But generally, oats as like a grain or a carb is going to have less impact on your blood sugar compared to like a white flour based option.
Wonderful. And we have two more in-house questions. Our first one is, can we add water instead of milk for this recipe? Will it have the same texture and
Yes, you can definitely add water instead. It may just be like a little less creamy. And again, then you're losing like a bit of protein and calcium and vitamin D, but you can always boost the recipe with other ingredients. So yeah, water would be no problem to use instead.
And we also have the question, what is the general resting or I guess soaking time of oats? I guess if we're leaving this recipe overnight, is that 8 hours or can it be less than 8 hours?
I think it could just be a few hours. It's really just enough time to let the oats absorb the liquid, and it may also depend your preferred consistency, but it certainly doesn't need to be overnight. It probably within a few hours it would be ready to eat.
That's good, especially if you're looking for a quick snack, I guess. Or
Mhm.
like me, you forget to put it in the fridge overnight. So can you make it in the morning and, eat it later on in the morning?
Right.
Sounds good. Wonderful. We have a few more questions here, which is wonderful. Are there any natural sweeteners, not artificial chemicals, such as agave, that don't raise blood sugar levels?
The only sweeteners that don't raise your blood sugar are um like the typical ones you hear of, like aspartame, Ace K, sucralose, stevia, which are all grouped under that like artificial sweetener category, or sugar alcohols, which are things like maltitol, xylitol, erythritol, sorbitol. Um, Now, those, I mean, there's been information recently, especially in terms of like the harmful health effects of those sweeteners, but Health Canada regulates them all. And so they do have an upper limit and they are deemed completely safe for our health up until that upper limit, but the upper limit is really, really high. It's like for aspartame, for example, it's the equivalent of 10 Diet Cokes in a day. So like most people wouldn't come close to that. But those are the only sweeteners that don't raise your blood sugar. I can also send Andrea, if you're interested, there I have a whole list of like sugars that do increase your blood sugar and then sweeteners that don't. So I can send that out. You can use for reference if you'd like.
That would be great. I will send out to everyone who joined us on Zoom or who signed up in person and provided their email address, a copy of the recipe, of course, and as well as any additional information that Nicole has kindly sent to us as well. You will definitely get that passed along. A few more questions here. Is artificial vanilla as good as pure vanilla extract?
Um, I think it really comes down to the flavor. This one is pure, but usually I keep artificial because the price difference is crazy. And I feel like you're using so little in a recipe that you're really not going to notice the difference in taste. And I don't think there's any difference in the health benefits. Usually you're using like max a teaspoon of vanilla for a recipe. So I don't think the pure is worth the extra cost. It's like at least double the cost of artificial.
That's always good to hear, especially these days when, everything is
Mhm.
perhaps a little more expensive. I always wondered that myself. Um, one last question here. If coconut, palm, and brown sugar all have the same impact, what about honey? Is that better than all the different types of sugar, or would you still classify that as the other types of sugar mentioned?
Yeah, I would put honey, maple syrup, or any other type of syrup like in the same category as those sugars. Again, the only difference would be if like less honey goes a longer way, so you're overall able to eat less of it.
Right. Oh, and one last question here. Can we add banana? I know this recipe had mentioned berries, but what about other perhaps more sugary fruits like a mango or banana, pineapple? Is that also okay to add, or is it going to, you know, kind of throw off the balance?
Yeah, for sure. You could add any fruit that you want to this recipe. Berries are going to be like your lowest carb type of fruit. And because we have carb in the oats, if we're using a banana, maybe half a banana would be a better portion. I would keep kind of your fruit serving, regardless of what you're choosing, to about max half a cup, but you can use any fruit that you would like. As I said, this recipe is very customizable, so change up the fruit, change up like the toppings, some other nice toppings. I like to drizzle like natural peanut butter. I've done unsweetened coconut. If you look online, you can find like themed ones like pumpkin pie or chocolate. There's so many different variations. So yeah, you can mix and match the ingredients to your preferences.
Great. I think that's it for questions. So I just want to say thank you so much, Nicole, for all that information. I definitely thought I knew a lot about the overnight oats recipe, but I have learned many new things today, which is wonderful. Um, for those of you at home and those of you in the room as well, LMC is a wonderful organization, and they're coming back in May to do South Asian health and diabetes in-person talk. I'm not sure if that will be you, Nicole, but someone from LMC Healthcare will be here at our BD location, and sign up is available for that as well. We're getting lots of thanks come through in the chat here for you, Nicole.
Oh, thank
Great.
you.
It was very insightful, which is, yeah, I absolutely agree. And we'll also be inviting LMC back in June for nutrition and aging. So talking about nutrition as you're aging, not necessarily, for 55 plus or anything like that, but, kind of as you, I imagine, hit each new decade, your nutritional needs will change. So LMC will be covering all of that as well. And some more thank yous coming through here. Thank you. Very good information. Everyone is really enjoying the session.
Good, I'm glad. If you guys have any feedback about how today went or like interest in future sessions, let Andrea know so I can take that back to our team and better suit your needs in the future.
Absolutely. Yes, I will collect all the feedback and send along the numbers to you as well, Nicole.
Perfect. And I'll send, yeah, some of those follow-up resources on the sweeteners, and I can send the herb and spice guide. And if there's any other requests for resources, let me know.
Sounds great.